Please introduce yourself and briefly summarize your education and professional background.
Sure. So my name is Mark Maguire, and I have been working in the GIS/engineering field for a long time now. I would say going back to maybe 2003, and originally from New England, and that's where I went to school, Boston University, got a master's degree in geography. And I remember at the time, even in my undergrad, I had an environmental analysis and policy degree, and I said, "I'm sure I can really get a job in this." So I stumbled upon GIS as kind of a tool, as a marketable tool to maybe help me get a job a little easier out of college. But 20 plus years later, I'm still doing it. So that seemed like a good choice many years ago. But yeah, I started really in the environmental industry, working for an environmental consulting company in New England, and really sort of stayed with that. But in more sort of recent years, moved from maybe more environmental to infrastructure. So right now I work for HRG, which is a engineering firm based in Pennsylvania. But we're mostly local government, so we work a lot with authorities, townships, water, wastewater operators, and so much of what we do centers around infrastructure. And most recently, too, we've been really diving into stormwater, as I always say, is sort of a forgotten utility when it comes to the typical infrastructure we think of, that provides drinking water and sewage and all those services that we really rely on. Stormwater is also an important utility, and I would say we're in a bit of a crisis, and we have been in some time when it relates to stormwater. So that's a lot of what we're focused on as a company, and combining that with GIS and mapping and asset condition assessment. We're pretty busy with all that sort of work in the Pennsylvania area.
All right, thanks, Mark. At some point, I want to make sure we get into those concerns that you have, but let's start. Maybe they'll come up. You recently gave a presentation at the Esri IMGIS conference. Could you mind telling me about what that presentation is, its focus, and why it was important, and why I think an important topic for people to hear about?
It related to a lot of work we're doing in the stormwater condition, I'd say, arena, where we're looking at stormwater problems, which are typically flooding, collapsing infrastructure, that really can lead to some catastrophic events. Some of the townships in which we work actually have had deaths of folks, trapped in a stormwater flash flood, or just being affected by infrastructure that's collapsing. So me with a GIS background, we think of GIS as mapping, right? A mapping tool. So obviously you need to have your stormwater assets mapped, right? You need to know where everything's at. You need to know where the concerns are, where there's flooding due to overflowing pipes, or just stream level rise in conjunction with stormwater issues. So sort of combining those two, we've been doing what we call rapid assessment of stormwater systems. And the presentation was really looking at that process, how we sort of tackle the issue with, number one, locating assets, but more importantly, seeing what's wrong with an asset. So we use cameras. Everybody uses cameras, right? But these are like GoPro cameras, and there's one that we've been using that is a slim camera that actually will fit between the grates of a lot of the stormwater infrastructure we're looking at. So we can get a really good assessment, a 360 assessment of what lies beneath the surface, which is pretty unique, and it's a quick process, and it really gets us analyzing the data quickly and being able to roll it up using GIS tools, visualization tools, and maps and analytics and all that stuff. So yeah, it was sort of an overview of that process and some of the work that we're doing in Pennsylvania.
You called it a rapid assessment. Do you think you could kind of clarify that, what that means to you by going over maybe was the previous practice and then why this is better and why more rapid in as much detail as you can?
Being in the GIS industry for many years, and you could even say decades, when we think about a traditional survey, right, where we send crews out, they're collecting maybe centimeter scale data. When we're sending crews out doing, road surveys, wastewater surveys, the traditional way was using some very important equipment, very exact equipment for sure. But that process involved collecting a lot of data, processing it back in the office, analyzing it, pushing it maybe to a map, a spreadsheet, a CAD file. It's a very cumbersome process because the technology didn't allow us to share data as well as we can now. In recent years with GIS, we can take all that equipment and connect it much more efficiently to each other and connect workflows. So when we're collecting data in the field, we don't have to send it to a USB drive to process at a computer and pitch it back and forth. We can actually send data very quickly in this connected GIS environment that connects data to the cloud and connects users can really help us, take data in the field and immediately put it in the hands of people that can analyze it. And it's not just locations, right? X, Y, Z, taking coordinates. It's actually collecting all that information, that assessment data, and then adding we call the media files, right? Photos and videos, that all those records are being stored together, tied to a location so that someone in the office can actually see that real time. Again, stormwater is not, rapid assessment is important, right? We want to make quick decisions and look at data, but the other applications of GIS, looking at EMS and real-time analysis of, forest fires and EMS type activities. That's the real power of GIS. That's how it's changed so much in that sort of real-time perspective. But again, we're taking advantage of that concept where we're trying to act quickly and intelligently and efficiently in the field to really inform solutions to problems that we're seeing out there.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about specifically what an engineer or a field worker might actually be doing? Are they taking pictures with a camera, like their phone cameras, is this device, and what kind of tools are they using? Is this a software that goes back to a desktop eventually? Are they working right off of phones or tablets in the field?
So we're sort of setting everything up in the field in the online environment. So you set up your database templates. You set up your procedures or workflows. You can prescribe the type of data that you want, and you can make it easy for field staff instead of having them type certain remarks or observations. We can set drop downs. So that's all set in the ArcGIS environment. We do set that up in the desktop, but then we publish that online, so everything's ready to go in the field. So we utilize a software called Field Maps, which is in the ArcGIS Esri suite of mobile applications. And that's sort of our data collection platform. We sometimes will have preloaded asset information. If a township or a client, they know where their inlets are, they know where their assets are, we can have that mapped before. So we're in the field, we have that as a reference. It'll show you where you're standing in reference to what those assets are. In some cases, we might be building that data set from scratch. So we're out in the field, we might be with one of their public works folks who knows that there's pipes and there's structures around. But that's our platform. And then from there, typically I keep mentioning, or I've mentioned it a few times, stormwater inlets, right? So those are the grates that sit on the side of the roads that do open, but they're usually covered with asphalt or the curb has fallen in and they're very difficult to open. They require a public works truck. So those those inlets are really the key to stormwater, or at least in my opinion, it's kind of where it all starts, right? When you have runoff from impervious area, from roads, from parking lots, that's where the water goes. So it's important to really make sure that that's first sort of line of contact in your stormwater system to make sure that that's in good shape. So we focus on those assets. I mentioned that slimline camera. It's like a GoPro. It'll actually fit between the grates, so we can put it essentially on a glorified selfie stick. It's not the technical term, but we have that. We lower that. We do a 360 shot of the stormwater inlet to see what sort of pipes are in there, to see if there's debris, see if there's water, standing water. We do an observation, but we take photos right there in the field and we load those to the GIS map. So immediately those pipes are then marked with those images. The folks in the field can do an assessment, but we also have those we can review in the office. It also takes that 360 panoramic shot that with the software we're using does require some post-processing. But that's sort of a bonus. You can stare at your inlet and pan up and down 360. But really we're looking at the pipes that are connecting that system and what sort of condition they're in. I'll say too, most of our clients, they have CCTV cameras that can go down stormwater pipes. Todd, you've probably seen them like a little robot with a camera on it. This is just getting the initial pipe, so it's not replacing that, but it's getting that initial inlet, which is really the start of that flow, and doing an assessment of that to start. And then we can also look at other structures sort of along the tree, right? As once the water starts flowing, eventually it's going to end up in a stream, and that outfall, that pipe that emits the water to the stream, we can also look at that for condition assessment. But that's sort of the workflow there to collect the data at least. And then once we get it, the beauty of it too is, I mentioned this before, but traditional survey, we might get the data and then 6 months later turn it around into a product, right? Here we can actually see it real time. We can set up some dashboards immediately using this ArcGIS online environment. We can see a pie chart of all of the inlets we've inspected right off the bat. It'll show what's good, what's bad, what's poor. Immediately we can start looking at some hot spots of areas, problematic areas that we want to look at. Because usually if there's one bad pipe, there's probably several in the area, right? So that's the sort of analytics and the work we can look at from there.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong, but how I understand, I believe that so HRG is helping, say, a utility or a municipality understand their assets and the condition of their assets. They're not the ones doing like the shutoffs and the things that would need to be done during an emergency. Is this more just, checking assets so that when those emergencies happen, that your clients can do their jobs better and quicker for their customers, the people?
That's a good way to describe it. We're just sort of partnering with our clients to help them understand. So when emergency does happen, right, there's a flooding event, there's a main break. And again, stormwater can be a little more challenging just because a lot of it is, what we call non-point source runoff, and there's, it's related to impervious area. On the other side with utilities, if there's a water break, you have a good GIS, you can use that to figure out what your emergency response, your shutoffs might be. But yeah, on the stormwater side, what we're focused with is really capital improvement planning, life cycle asset management. There's a lot of buzzwords surrounding that, but I know you've heard in all of your infrastructure work here, Todd, that it's so much more expensive to be reactive than proactive, right? If there's a pipe failure that we know it's going to fail, we might have some safeguards already in place, but if we don't know where the issues are, it's going to cost us long term. But the other important part of this too is was great. So we found, 12 problem areas, 12 potential project areas for improvements in this township. How are we going to pay for it, right? Pennsylvania has a really good sort of environmental oversight through the DEP, and there's this program called MS4, which allows the state to come in and govern the stormwater activities for communities that are within that program. So there's a lot of focus on stormwater, and rightly so, DEP is enforcing different guidelines, but it's what they call an unfunded mandate, where other mandates, there's funding available. Well, I guess that there is funding available for stormwater, but when it comes to different infrastructure bills and taxpayer money that can support improvements, it hasn't been there for stormwater, so it's been a challenge, right? We've been working with clients to develop what's called a stormwater authority, which actually creates a funding mechanism that can fund projects and long-term infrastructure projects. And that's actually based on impervious area. So it's a fee based on how much impervious area that you might have as a property owner. Then I can go into that a little bit more, but it's important because, we're identifying problems. These problems are worse than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's important to look full circle, right? It's that, great, we know there's issues, but how are we actually going to fund them to actually make improvements? So we also work with our clients in different ways to do that. So it kind of the full circle from initial data collection in GIS and survey to actually funding and constructing projects.
Yeah, if you don't mind, could you go into how that funding mechanism works? Because the point of these interviews, I really like to see if people can learn something from this, and everyone's concerned about funding and what they can do. And perhaps this is an idea that they haven't thought about that they could suggest to the other groups that they work with.
In Pennsylvania, we worked on one of the first, what's called a regional stormwater authority, because we know stormwater doesn't stop at township lines, municipal boundaries, right? And a lot of the sanitary authorities become the stormwater authorities as well, and those often cover larger areas. And if you can step back and look at stormwater from a larger scale, that's always important, because it helps you look at the whole problem, right? So, but I think Pennsylvania is unique in that we have that. I know there's other funding mechanisms in other states, but I think Pennsylvania is one of the first. So yeah, what we do is we initially will look very cursory, because we might not have good data from the start. All right, let's look at this township and see, how many tens of millions of dollars of construction projects we might have in the next 10 or 20 years, right? Based on the current conditions. And the more data we have, the better. And from there, we say, okay, well, how much of that money do we need to raise from potentially stormwater fees? And with that too, it's not just, some people call it a tax, which it's not. It's a fee. If a organization is tax exempt, they still have to pay a stormwater fee. But it also gives people incentive to do stormwater best practices, right? If you have an enormous parking lot on your property, you're contributing a lot to stormwater issues. If that parking lot is not in use anymore, converting that to different stormwater friendly construction activities can get you credits for your stormwater fee. So there's incentive, and it's just a good educational aspect of it too, as part of these stormwater authorities. But again, the more information we have, the more GIS data, the more assessment information we have, we can use those funds more efficiently and identify real priorities. But even that analysis of looking at impervious area is a real GIS tool or a GIS function, just mapping the amount of square footage and acres of parking lot, roads, even packed gravel can be considered impervious area. But that's sort of the metric behind developing the stormwater fee, at least the work we've been doing here in Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's great. I think that's interesting and good advice. Perhaps are there other bits of advice you could pass on that you learned, maybe you didn't think was going to happen, that came across in your work, maybe just this Pennsylvania project or in something else, but perhaps something that you could pass along to others who might be doing similar work.
The one thing, and I sort of touched on this earlier, is or a few times, I think I've touched on this, but when we're looking at like utility systems, when we think about, well, we need to get this surveyed, right? We need to know exactly how many, how many certain types of pipe, certain sizes. Like we think about asset inventories more on the financial side, looking at equipment, maybe looking at financial assets of a sewer authority. But we feel like we have to get to the granular level, right, to understand. And a lot of times we work with engineers, and engineers are like to know to the nth degree, the types of assets they're dealing with. But with stormwater, I encourage people to think about the system, right? If we're collecting data about a stormwater system, do we really need to collect information to the centimeter level, right? We're dealing with these inlets, which are 2 foot by 3 foot. So can we more focus on understanding the system, the connectivity of these assets, not maybe spending time to measure each one exactly, but that's the whole point of this stormwater rapid assessment, right? So it's taking a step back and understanding how things are connected, and that's what GIS can do pretty efficiently, right? That wasn't a terrific answer, Todd, but thinking how things are connected more is what I've learned, especially in doing this sort of stormwater work through these different utilities. And the other thing I'll add is it's kind of incredible to see the diversity of assets that are out there, right? Even when it comes to sanitary utilities, which we work with as well. The amount of engineering that goes into these systems, I don't think people really think about, right? And maybe they weren't thinking about it 50 years ago when they were building subdivisions and not really thinking about exactly where the water is going to go. But we uncover some pretty crazy things in doing these surveys. And a lot of it is maybe people in townships kind of working with what they have, right? We've seen pipes in the ground that somebody just stuck a hole in the side of it and put another pipe below it to keep the water flowing. Some interesting things that you find underground, and really without exploring, we would never really know that, So I think people take a lot of this for granted, right? And in the infrastructure world, we know this for sure, but especially when it comes to stormwater, people just assume, oh yeah, it's going to rain, the water's going to go somewhere. But there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of work to be done. I guess I can leave it at that.
As you're doing some of these surveys and finding these unusual things, some of them that perhaps problematic, what's the reaction you get when you return this into the whoever you're working for, your clients, and point out, hey, did you guys know about this?
It's sometimes it can be a delicate conversation, right? Because especially working with some of the utilities and the staff there who may have been at that organization for over 50 years, right? Managing the assets, and those assets were given to them by their previous folks who managed those assets, right? So when we're immediately reporting back on problems, you need to be a little bit delicate, with how you deliver that. But it's something too that I really enjoy personally, working with authority staff, township staff, local government staff, who aren't used to the technology, right, that we're working with. Now, everyone today is fairly used to it, with having computers in our back pockets, but working with the staff to show them the assets. A lot of times people will think like, oh, I bet the older folks, don't want to learn or are just going to pass it off. They actually embrace it a lot more than you would expect. Because it's to their legacy, right? They've been managing these assets and they want to pass that on to other generations to come. So that's been a really rewarding part of the work. Even saying that though, Todd, sometimes it is frustrating as well because there is still a big technology divide. And you might have the staff in the field willing and wanting to learn more technology so they can manage your assets better. But maybe the authority board or other folks within the administration, I'll say, might be more technology averse, right? So sometimes it's balancing that, right? And that can be challenging. I always, in doing GIS for so many years and talking to clients and potential clients, I always try and think about the argument, a nice to have versus a need to have. The nice to have usually doesn't go very far, right? We know budgets are tight in a lot of these organizations, but it's the need to have that I really focus on, right? Because bringing it back to stormwater, guys, you have millions of dollars of repair that you're gonna have to make within the next 10 years. You need some sort of technology to manage that electronically and also start recording these maintenance activities, these repairs that you're doing already. You need that system of record, or else you could be hit with some really big bills that that's going to be really hard to pay for down the road, and that's going to directly affect the constituents, right? The township folks who rely on all these services. So that's an important piece for sure.
That's some great advice, Mark. And if you have time, I'd love to hear a bit about those concerns you have for the overall state of stormwater infrastructure that you mentioned in the very beginning.
Right now, and I think most communities now have a good system in place for approving new construction projects, right? Even the more rural towns that we work with in our footprint, there's engineers in place, there's advisory boards in place to look at projects, to look at development, and people now know, hey, we got to look at stormwater, right? So are the calculations right? If you have X amount of parking lot, you need X amount of stormwater mitigation, or the amount of assets to cover that potential if there's a catastrophic storm event. Are you covered, right? So I think we're covered now, but years and years ago, it was always more of an afterthought. And even when it wasn't an afterthought, there was a lot of metal pipe being constructed, right? And it feels like right now all that metal pipe seems to be rusting at the same time. So a lot of that pipe, right, the bottoms rust out, and that's what our cameras are really picking up from the stormwater inlet shots. We can see right away if that bottom of the pipe is rusted out, that water is not flowing. It's flowing straight down, right? And that's when you can get some erosion and structural issues, and you start to see maybe on the street there's a little dip starting to form, or in someone's yard you can start to see. So that was certainly that was just a practice that was done. Now it's mostly PVC, but that's a big part of it for sure. And then just the size of the infrastructure that was constructed back then as well. We weren't having the extreme weather that we have now. They weren't really sized for future development, right? We see in rapidly growing communities, stormwater just if there's a small problem somewhere and there's a development that's next to it, that's going to exacerbate the problem. So even if the storm, even if these events were planned for in the infrastructure, and when you start adding a lot of these different pockets of stormwater infrastructure on the aggregate, they can cause some problems. And living here in Pittsburgh, Western PA, where we have houses built on the side of mountains. There's a lot of terrain issues too that we face as well. So it's sort of all those things that I think we're getting a good handle on now. We're just trying to assess a little better what was done, decades ago to make sure that it's not going to be a bigger problem, 10, 20 years from now.
All right, Mark, I think that was a great conversation, very useful. Before I stop recording, is there anything, among the things we talked about that you feel like we left out that maybe you want to add upon?
I mean, Todd, I will say, I've mentioned the software that we work with as Esri, ArcGIS Online, Field Maps, some of these buzzwords. Esri is a great partner of ours, and they're a partner of pretty much any organization, including our firm plus our public local government firms, agencies. They are the providers of this GIS software, and they're really the only provider. There's some other solutions out there, but the nice thing about going out to the conference that we mentioned here at the top of the chat here, that was hosted by Esri, and they really, that whole conference was focused on infrastructure, right? That was the name of the conference. And it was really cool to see, thousands of people all talking about infrastructure from different parts of the country too. But it's nice to have, a software vendor like Esri, but they're thinking bigger picture, right? They're working with us to try and solve some of these problems, and they're making the software more accessible. So it is easy for local government to really, latch onto the software, and it's not this arduous task of learning a new software or doing coding or, having an IT background is not a requirement to be able to do a lot of this work. So Esri for sure has been a great partner of ours, and they've really been at the forefront of all this motivation to want to improve our infrastructure. And I'm not just saying that because their event, we pay them software fees every year, just like a lot of our clients do. But it's money well spent, I'll say.